Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. My name is Charles Kelley. I'm a CL architect on the Solution Engineering Architect Leaders team within BMC. And in this webinar, I'm going to give an introduction to the event migration utility used for TSOM to BHOM migration of cell KBs. So our agenda for today is what is the event migration utility? Where can you get it? The configuration of the utility, the required KB preparation that you need to do before running it, and then how to run it. I'll cover using the utility for analysis only rather than migration, and then what can and cannot be migrated in the as far as the current 23.1 release. I'll give a demo of some use cases of using the utility. Then I'll give some troubleshooting hints. Finally, we'll cover some of the best practices. And finally, we'll cover the future plans for the event migration utility. And so what is the event migration utility? It's a Java-based utility that assists with the analysis and/or migration of TrueSight cell KBs to BMC Helix Operations Management. I say TrueSight cell KBs here, but it's TrueSight or BPPM, any cell KB that you have that you need to migrate. It was originally developed within the SEAL team, and it's now owned by the BMC R&D organization. It can automate the migration of refined and new rules, as well as certain policies, all to be listed on a later slide. And it's going to be released in a controlled manner initially. And we want to work with customers to ensure that they have a good experience with it and are able to overcome any obstacles as we're continuing the development of this utility. So where can you get it? The utility is available on BMC Communities at the blog post shown here. This blog post will be updated whenever there is a new version, and we'll update the file attachment there, so be sure to follow the post. There are documentation links available within the post, so you will have that easily accessible. And if you have any usage questions or wish to report a defect or improvement, please do open a support case for that. So how to run it, the prerequisites of running the utility. So first thing to know is that the system that you run it on does not have to be a TSOM server. You can run it anywhere, and what you do is you copy the KBs over to that system where you're going to run the utility. You'll need Java 11 or later is required on the system, and we recommend OpenJDK 11.0.7 or higher. Need to create a top-level directory, for example, event migration. Within that directory, you'll create the msl_home/etc subdirectory tree, and that's where you'll put the KBs that you want to migrate. And then unzip the utility in that same top-level directory. Within that, when you unzip it, you'll get this directory structure that you'll see here that's got the configuration files and the jar file for the utility. And then on to how to run it. So in the command prompt, in the location where the jar file exists, you'll run the command here that's shown here, where you'll specify the jar file along with the TrueSight.msl_home parameter and the TrueSight.conf parameter to point to that msl_home directory that you created in the configuration directory. And I just want to also note here that your log file for the event, the log file for the utility is the event_migration.log. That's in that same directory. That's in that migrate kb-23.1.0 directory. And that's where you'll go for look at any logging of the utility that's running behind the scenes. Okay, and so then we have the configuration files of the utility. So there's 4 configuration files. The first one is the migration.properties. This is where you'll set the BHOM tenant details here, and you'll need to do that before you run the utility. And there's also a few additional parameters for controlling policy migration. There's the class category.properties file. This categorizes the TSOM classes into either internal third-party, internal deprecated, or custom categories. And the definition of each of those is shown here. I don't necessarily read those out here, but you can see on the screen here what those different categories mean. There is the class slots.csv file. This is because a few of the TSOM slots are removed from child classes and the out-of-the-box BHOM classes, but it's customizable through this file. You can tweak that if necessary. And there is the TSOM to BHOM name mapping.properties. And this is what maps the classes and slots from TSOM to BHOM. For example, the event class in TSOM is mapped to the monitor event class in BHOM. And this is where that's defined. So there's some required KB preparation before you run the utility to migrate KB. You'll need to run mQuery, and you'll need to get mQuery output from the cells in addition to the KBs themselves. So you'll need to get the policies, the selectors, and the timeframes all exported out into their own Baroque files here. And the last one listed here is for any custom data tables that the customer may have. And the utility doesn't use those directly at this time, but that is information that you would need for planning out the time required for complexity for a migration that you're going to perform. So it's good information to have here, and the utility may use it at a future time. And so these Baroque files, when you export them, put them at the top level of each cell directory under the tools mcelhome/etc. So at each cell name directory that you have beneath there, they'll have their own set of Baroque files that you've exported from them. And you should either have the customer export this, or you'll need to get the cell's var directory in addition to the KB, and then you can run a temporary cell instance on your own system for doing the exporting. Now, if you're not familiar with running a temporary cell instance on your own system, then it'll be better that you just have the customer do the export from their running cell for you. Let's talk about using the utility for analysis only. So in addition to using the utility for direct migration to your BHOM instance, it can also be used for analysis of the rules and policies. It can help you gain insight into the complexity of migrating a KB. It can show you what in a rule prevents it from being migrated, if anything does. You can also get some hints within the utility, or it'll give details on what may simply need to be altered. And one thing it also shows is details on if you're going to migrate a DDEN policy, a dynamic data enrichment policy, how you'll need to have that the data that it uses into a CSV file for migrating that policy. And when you look at such a policy, the tool will tell you exactly what it needs to regarding having that CSV file exported. Okay, so what can be automatically migrated and what requires manual migrations with the utility? So on the left side here, we have the list of policies and rules that in a current 23.1 release can be automatically migrated with utility. And also it includes the fact that we have time frame support in the utility now for policies, the time frames associated to policies. And as execute rule support is coming for automatic migration, we're going to go ahead and list that here on the left-hand side, but just note that one is coming soon. On the right-hand side here is we have a list of the items that have to be manually migrated at this point, rather than that can't be automatically migrated with the utility. But all these items are being assessed for future automation within the tool. Okay, now I'm going to give a utility demonstration. I'll show analyzing a rule that can't be automatically migrated due to its content. I'll show migrating a leaf class, migrating a refine rule, and migrating a suppression policy. So here in my command prompt, I'm already at the directory for the utility. And you can see here that I've got the files. I've created I'll show here in a moment that I've created a command script for launching it to make that a little easier. And if we take a look quickly up at the mcelhome/etc, I've got just a demo cell a demo cell KB here that we'll be working with for this webinar. And that already has the Baroque files. I don't have the last Baroque file for custom data tables because on this I don't have any custom data tables to export. Okay, so let me just type out this launch.cmd script. You can see that it's just going to execute the jar file along with the required parameters for the mcelhome and a conf directory. So let's go ahead and launch this. Okay, so when this launches, you'll see that the utility will list out the KBs that it finds under the mcelhome etc directory that it has, and so you can see that it's picked up your KBs. You'll see the name of the cells that it's found, and then it gives you the URL, which is localhost:8080, to get into the UI of the tool. So let's go ahead and come over here and go into that. So just localhost 8080, and we're quickly into the tool. So let's first take a look at a rule that doesn't migrate. So we're going to, just for analysis. So we have this rule here that has an error in it. So we take a look, and it will gives us the details on that. We don't have operator, not operator support in BHOM. If we click on the error, then it gives the details here. Now, yes, there is some updates to some version info that's in the that are in these, but that's something that still needs to be improved or enhanced there. But the issue here is that we don't have not operator in BHOM. So for this rule, it would take either manual migration just to do it manually, or you'd have to tweak the rule to not use the not operator. If you're to do manual migration, you may just have to look into, for this specific example, take a look in perhaps into using a does not equal, slot does not equal whatever value rather than a not. Okay. So now we're be interested in migrating a rule here. And so we can see that it uses the SNMP linkup. But before we go to migration of this rule, we need to migrate the classes that are involved with it. Excuse me, the class that's involved with it. So we'll come over to classes. And in order to do migration, you click on the hamburger icon here and you click on migration. And what always comes up first is gives you the details of the of your BHOM tenant. And so just click on next. And so we want to find this class. So because there's many classes here, and so you can see over here on the right-hand side, we've got a search. So let's search just for the SNMP link up. And okay, so we have it here, this last one here. Now, so I'm going to give a quick demonstration here. So this one won't work if I do it just this way. If I just select that child class and click on migrate, you'll see that no class qualified for migration. That's because we have to select all the parent classes to migrate. One thing you can do there is always to just go through migrating your parent classes. Say you're going to do a bunch of SNMP class migrations. You start with, you can start with your parent event and then your MC adapter base down to SNMP trap, SNMP generic, SNMP enterprise. You get all those parent classes, and then you'd be all ready for any child classes that you need to do. You may have a couple of child classes within there that you're interested in. And so you could do those parent classes ahead of time. So what we'll do here is we'll just do this class and all the parent classes together that are required. So I can see SNMP link up, and then on the parent class name, I can see that the parent class here is SNMP underscore SNMP traps. Okay, so let's change this search to SNMP underscore SNMP traps. And we can see that one here. Okay, so we'll select that. And as you'll notice that as I select this additional class, that it keeps the previous one selected. Not only can you see it here that it's selected, but you can see up in the top right that the number that I have selected. Okay, so SNMP underscore SNMP traps, and then we'll need to pick SNMP underscore enterprise. Okay, so we'll change our search here to SNMP enterprise. There it is right at the top. So we select it, and even though you don't see the others on the screen, you can see that the number selected is still increasing here. Okay, so next we need to get SNMP underscore trap. And so we'll select that here. Then we see that we go to MC adapter base. So let's add that one, MC adapter base. Okay, there we go. It's the first one. And then finally, if we haven't migrated it before, there's the base event class. So let's just search on event. And here we go. We select it, and that's as far as we have to go. You don't do a migration of the core event class. We only have to go up to event. And we can click on migrate. And just want to note quickly as well here that there already is an improvement for the utility to come at a later time, that when you pick a child class or a leaf class, that it'll automatically pick that handle the migration of all the parent class, the chain of parent classes for you. So let's go ahead and click on migrate here. And now we see that migration triggered successfully. So now it says it's triggered successfully, but we need to go and take a look, because then there's the back end work of the utility communicating to BHOM. So let's go ahead and go to migration summary and take a look at the classes. So we'll take a look at the last one here because we know that the previous one was where I just quickly showed you how it wouldn't work. So we'll take a look, click this to download the CSV file of the summary. I'll just pop this open real quick. And you can see here along, if you look down this list here, that class migration successfully, class migrated successfully, class migrated successfully. Okay, so that looks good. So let's continue back to the utility. Okay, so now we've completed our class structure migration. So let's go over the rule that we see that was going to use that class. So if we click on this one, and again, this is just a very simple rule. Of course, you're going to come across rules that are of varying complexity, but for this demonstration, I just wanted to keep it simple because it's not about showing the complexity of any rule here. We just want to show you the steps that are required in performing a migration here. And so again, I'll come up here, I'll go to rules this time, and which is selected at the top. I'll go to rules, I'll go to migration. Again, the first screen that comes up shows the BHOM details, so you can see where you're going to migrate to. You can confirm that. This is set in the migration.properties configuration file. Go to next, and we know that that rule that I had there was called test rule. So I will select this one, and I will click on migrate. And good. It says migration triggered successfully. But that's, again, that's triggering the migration. There's backend work that goes and communication to BHOM and then your BHOM tenant. So let's go ahead and back to the migration summary. And now we see the rules and we see it's completed, and completed rules equals 1. Total rules was 1, so 1 out of 1 was good. But let's pop open this summary. Wait here for it to load. And so you can see that the policy created successfully with ID, and it gives the ID that it was created in BHOM. Okay, good. So let's go over here and let's refresh the screen here. Okay, so here's the migration is done. So when the rule is migrated over here to a BHOM policy, the policy name always has migration prefixed. Right now that's static. You can't change that. It's an incoming enhancement that you can change this the prefix that it gives to the policies. And then it's the next value in there is the rule name that had come from TSOM, followed by the class name that's involved in the policy. So if we just take a quick peek at this, you can see that the has the class name, the selector that was the same from the rule in TrueSight with SNMP link up, and our my custom SNMP slot equals test. And down here, you can see what it does. This one was a very simple enrichment rule. So you can see that it has the same logic here as your rule. Now, back here, you can see it there, and you can also see it back here, is that the policies created is disabled because we want you to always be able to take a look at the policy that gets created, evaluate it before, and agree to it before you enable the policy. So let's come back over to the event migration utility. We can then go to a policy. Have a suppression policy that I would like to migrate. And so we can see here, it gives you the detail. Now it looks this way because it's looking at the Baroque file, right? And so it's even giving the line numbers of the Baroque file that this policy is in. And so I want to migrate this particular suppression policy. So it's going to click on the 3 dots and go to migration again. Again, it confirms the details here of the tenant you're going to migrate to. We'll click on next. And there's a lot of policies here, so let's just go to the category and say, let's look at just suppression policies. There we go. We could have also searched for the name. But so here's the name of the policy that we want to migrate. We'll select it and we'll migrate this policy. Okay, that says it triggered successfully. But again, we'll go over to migration summary. Now we see that it has a type of policies that completed and 1 out of 1 completed successfully. I'll click and download the migration summary. With this one, you can see that total BHOM policies to be created, TSOM policies converted to 1 BHOM policies, and the policies created successfully. It gives you the ID. So again, let's switch back over to our BHOM. Let's refresh our screen here. And then we have our new policy. So again, we have the prefix of migration. Then it gives this one will have the policy name that was migrated as the next field, and then followed by, again, the class. And so this is saying monitor event. As this policy, the policy in TSOM was based on the event class, which maps to monitor event in BHOM. So let's just take a quick peek. And this one is a suppression policy, so you can just see that it has the equivalent selector criteria, monitor event, where the message contains EMU webinar, and it's just a suppression policy. So that's just simply selected here as a suppression. And again, we can see that it's not enabled, as well as on the screen here that it's not enabled, because again, you want to be able to evaluate that you're happy with the results before you enable it. Let's come back to the presentation. Okay, let's move on to some best practices. So again, the tool, the utility is new. As the usage of it increases, of course, the best practices list would increase. But here's some of the best practices that we have is one is you can create a simple command file to launch the utility, so that you don't need to recall the long Java syntax each time. So that's going to help you out and just make it a bit simpler to launch. And you need remember to migrate your classes first. Of course, you need those there for your rules to work. And so, but then migrate those from parent and then the required child. You could do it the way I showed in the utility, where you get the whole chain. But if you get your parent classes migrated that you're going to require, and then as necessary, you can migrate those leaf classes that apply to your rules. Remember that some rules may need alterations before they can be migrated. You might just have to tweak the logic a bit there. Note that not all rules necessarily need to be migrated. One thing is, remember that TSOM and BHOM are different products, work in different ways in some bits. Your previous requirements may no longer apply, and you'll need to work with or discuss with the customer to decide on what needs to be done. You may decide that some old rules and old policies that you have on the TrueSight side, or just that you don't want to do it that same way again. So you may not migrate everything. So you don't just need to do a blanket migration. Again, always check, just like I did in the demo, always check the migration summary after a migration. And in the KB directories, you can delete the .wic files, the .loadwic file in the directories, as well as the collectors, the lib, and the data directories to save space, because those aren't needed by the utility. And so some troubleshooting best practices. So one is that these are just a set of some examples, right? Not an exhaustive list. But so one problem that you could encounter is that you cannot migrate rules if they use functions and selectors. So some examples of that, if a selector in a rule uses cell info or the upper or lower functions, BHOM doesn't support those functions and selectors. So for those, you may require manual migration, or you might modify the rule. So for example, you might just normalize values. You might decide that you'll normalize values on BHOM so that you don't need to use the upper or lower functions in a selector. Another possibility is the leaf class does not migrate because it says no class qualified for migration. Now that is what I actually just shown in the demonstration. This occurs if the parent class is not migrated yet. The leaf class migration can fail. And so if you need to, you can check the migration summary if further confirmation is needed of that. Another item is the migration of policy would fail if the policy name has an I18N or a UTF-8 character, for example, a German umlaut or a Chinese character in it. In those scenarios, you'll want to single quote the string in the policy name, or use iconv to convert the characters. And if you still have any problems with that, then log a support case if you continue to encounter issues. And when you do log a support case, you'd always want to provide the cell KB that you're working on migrating, along with that event_migration.log file that I had mentioned previously. Another item that you may encounter is unable to remigrate a class that had been previously migrated. And because this is if a class already exists in BHOM, you can't migrate it again. So if this were to be required for any reason, what you need to do is just use the REST APIs, delete that class in BHOM, and then you could migrate it again if for some reason you had to. Final example here is the usage of match_regex to extract strings and rules in a cell KB. So one thing you have to note here or remember is that the match regex in BHOM, it only returns a true or false if there's a match, right? So if it's a different function than in the match regex in a cell KB. And so this one is you need to do a manual migration and evaluate if the string match function in BHOM would give you the same the required functionality. Okay, and let's take a look at some features for enhancement targeted for the future releases. So in the 23.2 release, we're looking at execute rule migration support. Also, we're looking for you'd be able to control the policy precedence setting. Right now, the policies precedents are set randomly at the utility. With the utility for the BHOM policies that are created, in the coming enhancement, you'll be able to have some control over the setting of that, and also multiple class support in BHOM. So BHOM recently added a multi-class support, where if you have multiple classes uh, um, referenced used in a selector of a BHOM policy, then, for example, all the applicable slots of those multiple classes would be listed within, for example, an advanced enrichment if you were going to enrich those. And so the utility needs to be updated to provide for that new functionality in BHOM. Okay, and then in the 23.3 release, which will be coming to that, we'll gain filter rule migration support, correlation policy migration support, timeout policy migration support, and dynamic data blackout migration support. And I just want to note here that release versions are always subject to change. These could always come at a different time. Thank you for attending today's webinar.